Morning guys, today we're going to be painting this reference from the Paint Your Style 2005 challenge. This is a reference from a few weeks ago and it was really one of my favorites. I found another just inspiring painting on Pinterest and I really liked their style that they used, and so I decided to use that method in my own painting. And so here you can see I'm using my Blue Pine Art sketchbook. I really love the sketchbook. It's full of watercolor paper and I'm sketching out with really light lines here, kind of the placement of those trees, where I want those trees to go, so that when I start painting and get really messy and in with the color, then I know where those trees are supposed to go along the pathway here. I'm going to tape down really well. The masking tape is what I like. It's just plain and simple and cheap, and I tape down all the way around so I have that nice clean white border. This is my preferred way of painting. I know some other artists like having that rough edge on the side. They like painting edge to edge, or they like doing other things. So once I have it all taped down, I am starting with my wet on wet method. Here I use a couple different colors to achieve that yellow. I really liked using the yellow ochre. I use my Daniel Smith yellow ochre, and then I also get some gamboge. They're in the center. Another color I really like using is the Naples yellow and then the Naples yellow red. These are also both Daniel Smith colors. Here at the bottom, I really liked that burnt sienna that I'm adding here. And so this is my first layer, and so I want to add those light rays. I want to add that background color that I'm going to be able to see behind the shadow here. So I'm painting all of this on wet, and I'm adding those yellows and then that burnt sienna color, and I'm doing this as I go. I use a clean wet brush sometimes to lift up the paint wherever I want to maintain that white, that background white. Here I'm using a method I like to use often, is just use clean water and I'm splattering that onto the paint, the wet paint, and it creates a really neat effect, that kind of splatter effect. One of my favorite colors I've been using recently is lavender. And I really like the granulating properties of the lavender that I use. I use a Van Gogh watercolor paint, and this is the lavender. And so I'm using that in these areas where it's going to have a little bit of shadow, either in those shadow areas, either on the floor, the forest floor, or at the edge of that light where you're going to see it behind the trees. Now I'm also using one of my other, it's a Roman Schmalz paint that I like. This is a mineral violet here for the shadow areas. So I'm going to continue to add this violet here along the forest floor. I want to preserve those areas where that light is coming through the trees and making that splotchy, light filtered look on the bottom. And then I'm adding the mineral violet wherever I want to add shadow. And I'm adding it here at the edge of these sun rays, as well as along the forest floor. I'm going to use a clean brush here to smooth in the color into the surrounding paper. I don't want a harsh line between the dark color and the light rays. I want to have a really nice smooth blend. And so I'm using a clean brush to achieve that. And then just continue to add shadow wherever I feel like that's necessary. I'm continuing to add the yellow ochre and then the Naples yellow in these areas where I want those light rays to be. Because after this layer dries, I'm going to add some darker colors on top of it, and I want to be able to have this yellow color in the background to be able to achieve that light ray effect. If I feel like any of these rays are too heavy, I go back with a clean brush and then I smooth in the paint, and then I also lift up the paint in these areas. All right, here's where I start to add the trees and we start to see the forest fill in. And so I'm starting with my lightest color. This is a really watered down version of that yellow ochre. And I'm using my rigger brush to create these fine branches and these really small trees there in the back. And so I just keep adding these trees wherever I feel like they should go. This is going to be that background of the forest, and just this is where I start. I put away the reference at times. I kind of glance at it and then I keep painting where I feel like those trees need to go. I like using the rigger brush for this because it creates a more random, kind of sporadic look for both the branches and then those leaves that we're going to add. I'm using a thicker mixture of the yellow ochre. I alternate between the yellow ochre and that Naples yellow red. And I really like how this looks, how it's layering upon that tree layer, the branches upon branches. I really liked the effect I saw in one of a photo of another painting that another artist did. It was just beautiful. And so I really want to create this watery, very blended look here. So I'm using I'm using clean water, and I'm adding this to make this wet on wet method. So as I add trees and as I add some blotches of the Naples yellow and the Naples yellow red, just really want this to be sporadic. I want it to seem like that, like it's like sun dappled forest shining down on these leaves and on these trees. Here we're going to start layering some thicker mixtures of that yellow where the leaves and where the branches are throughout the forest. And so I'm using, this is yellow ochre. It's a thicker mixture than I used before. And I'm adding this to layer. I'm going to layer over this the darker colors as we go, because you want to have that like backlit forest look. I'm going to keep adding some trees. Again, I'm still using my rigger brush. I want this to still be very watery and smooth and mix together really well. I'm adding those trees and continue to add that in a darker color. All right, here we go with even a darker color. This is going to be the burnt sienna that I love using. And I'm going to use a clean brush here at the bottom. I want those trunks to blend in smoothly at the forest floor. And I'm going to keep using that burnt sienna to make trees. This is kind of that middle layer of the forest. And I'm still using my rigger brush. I really just like the random markings that it makes. And so I really like that look on this piece. Continuing to use my clean brush to smooth in the branches and the tree trunks that I'm painting here. Keep adding trees, as many trees as you think are necessary. You can look at the reference and count them, or you can just go with your gut and add them where you think that they need to go. Keep looking at your overall painting and take notice where it looks empty, where it feels like you need to add some more. You want to have that central path clearing there, but you don't want to cover up that with trees, but all the way around you want to be able to fill in the trees where you feel like they need to go. Now I'm going to start adding leaves with this cute little sponge. This is a super cheap sponge that I found at a random art store here in Thailand. And I don't know if they meant to use it for paint or not, but I really like the leaf effect that this makes. And I'm not sitting here with a brush trying to do every single little leaf. And so I really like the pattern that this makes. So I am dabbing this. The sponge is clean and slightly moist, but you don't want it to be soaking wet because it's going to remove those holes from the sponge. And so I dab it onto the moist paint, and then I add it onto my painting, and it makes this really nice leaf splotchy look. I'm now adding the burnt sienna on top of that yellow ochre, but I'm not going all the way to the edge because I want to preserve that backlit look. I'm going to keep adding the burnt sienna on all the places where I feel like it needs to go. I even add some to the forest floor because you can see those leaves on the forest floor in the reference. So here I'm adding that here. And I want to preserve, again, those areas where the sun is really shining down through the leaves and it's leaving a lot of light there. Now I'm going to start adding my mineral violet, and I really like this look along with the burnt sienna and the yellow ochre. I think this is a really nice color palette. And so again, you want to make sure that your sponge is clean. Use a clean portion of the sponge, but you don't want it to be soaking wet because it's going to remove those holes. And those holes in the sponge are really what create that leafy look, that blotchy look on here. So you see how this is taking shape? I just really love how this looks. When you start adding that darker color for the contrast, it just takes on such a life of its own. Here I am using sepia, and I'm adding those darker trunks here on the foreground of the forest. And so it's a sepia, and I also mix in some of the mineral violet. I really liked that color together. Along the edge of these trees, there is an area where the light is shining on it, so you want to preserve that, make sure the trunk looks like it's being backlit. And so I use a little bit of burnt sienna there on the edge, and then with a clean brush, I lifted up some of that paint to create that backlit look. So I'm creating some more of the trees. At the bottom, you want those trees and that color to smooth into the forest floor. You don't want a harsh line there at the bottom. Here again, I'm adding that burnt sienna along the edge of the tree trunk so that it'll glow whenever it'll have that appearance of the light glowing on the edge of that tree trunk. And then that back edge, that left side of the tree trunk, you want it to be much darker. You want it to have a good contrast because that's what's going to create the effect of the light shining in from the right of how we're looking at this and shining against that tree trunk on the right side. And then so that will mean the left side is going to be in shadow, is going to be much darker. So as you create your tree trunks, keep that in mind. I'm creating a few more darker trees there in the back to create some depth. Now we're going to start working on this right side. And so I did use some burnt sienna, and I also used the sepia and mixed with the mineral violet, creating some of those darker tree trunks on the right-hand side. You want to leave that area where the light is shining through. You want to have the tree trunks to be a very watery mixture, or what you want to be over that area of light. So it'll create the effect of the light shining through and kind of obscuring. You can't really see that tree trunk because the light is so bright shining around that tree trunk. But then on either side, you want to create contrast by creating these darker trees. I'm smoothing in the base of the tree and with the forest floor. And I'm also adding some of that shadow, some of that really nice dark sepia color here at the bottom of the floor. We're going to continue to add shadow to the forest floor and darken the left side, the side of the tree trunk that's away from our light source. Again, I'm using sepia and mineral violet, but you can go with whatever color palette you like. And so these are colors that I really like, and I really like how the glow that they create. But I know so I tend to work with a warm palette. So you can see the mineral violet and the burnt sepia. These are very warm colors. But some people prefer to work with a cool palette. And so what colors would work well for your painting if you want to use a cool palette? And so this is where every artist, we get to shine. We get to use our imagination, and we to try this with different color palettes and create something really beautiful. I'm continuing to add the burnt sienna and a lot of contrast here on the forest floor. I really like how this is turning out. I'm adding some shadow along the bottom edge of the tree trunks, where the tree trunks are hitting that forest floor. I want to create that look of the light is coming and hitting that tree trunk, but is leaving shadow here on the forest floor. Now I'm using a really watery mixture of both the mineral violet and alternating that between the sepia, and I'm adding branches here along the top. You can see them in my reference photo. You can see that in my reference photo there are not a lot of leaves, and I've gone and added leaves with the mineral violet and the other things and using my sponge. And I did that because I wanted to make this reference my own. And so whenever you pick a reference, you have full permission to make that reference your own. Use your own color palette. Add things to the reference or take things away. This is your painting, and you get to create it however your imagination sees fit. And so just keep practicing and working on that. I know a lot of beginner artists, they're not really sure what their style is and what they like. And so just experiment with all of it. Paint it like I did it, and then paint it your own way, and then paint it like someone else did it. And just the more practice you get, the more that you'll be able to find your own style and be able to identify what really speaks to you and what you really love to paint. Here I'm continuing to use my rigger brush, and I'm using a thicker mixture, a more vibrant mixture of the paint to create these darker branches. I'm also using a thicker mixture of the paint with my sponge to create contrast here, and the leaves at the top, I want to create some darker leaves, and I really like how this is creating such depth in my painting. I'm going to continue to add leaves here along the top. I'm just looking, every few seconds I kind of take a step back, I move my hand and I look at the painting and kind of get a feel for where I feel like more leaves are needed. With this darker color, one of your main purposes is you want to create contrast. The best way to make that light source look really bright and to make those backlit leaves look really bright is to put contrast. And so the darker your foreground leaves are, the brighter that background light, that light source is going to look. And so I just keep adding these darker leaves wherever I feel like it's necessary, where I feel like the shadows would be based on the light source. I'm adding some burnt sienna here in the middle to create some more contrast there in the middle. All right, so there's our reference photo again, so you can take a look at it. And I'm just continuing to add leaves where I see fit. And then I wanted some bigger leaves here at the top and a little bit more watery look at that on the top corners. And so I'm using a clean brush. And then you see that I did sun strokes, ray strokes through. And so I use a clean brush and I dragged it through the color to create those light rays. Here at the bottom, I'm adding some splatter of some of the mineral violet and that sepia. I feel like the splatter gives it life, and so I like adding that to a lot of my landscape paintings. I am using my brush. I tried to be clean water, but it had a little bit of paint on it, but I wanted to remove some of those extra splatters in that area. And now is one of my favorite parts. I want you to sign this painting with pride. Practice your autograph and sign all your paintings with it. Whether you think it's a masterpiece or not, it doesn't matter. You did something amazing because you finished a piece. And so sign it. And I really like using white gouache for mine. I like put it on to have that really bright contrast, but you sign it however you want. Some people I've seen them use like a micron pen or a fountain pen. Do what works for you. And then you get to take off the tape and show off your painting. So thanks for joining me today. I'd really love to see how you did this reference. Please like and share this video. And if you share this on Instagram or on Facebook, please tag me at Watercolors of Glory. Thank you so much for joining, guys.